Good morning. Hi, my name's Simon, and what I'm going to talk to you today about is the woman at the well. Yesterday I was at church, and I was asked to talk about the Priory Club. Now, the Priory Club is a small group of people that meet in the community. It's a bunch of neighbours that meet every week, every Tuesday, and it's basically a club where people just come together and they chat and play games together. And actually, we don't even play games; we just chat. It's mainly made up of single parents. And there's loads of children who come along, and sometimes we do activities with the children, sometimes we do craft activities, sometimes we do play games, and we've organised lots of events for ourselves and for the community, and it's been a really good club. There's about 7 families that meet regularly. And actually my neighbour attends, my next door neighbour, my other neighbour next door to me as well attends, and it's people there have grown really close and really have begun to get to know one another. They spend time with each other, not just on the Tuesday but on other occasions like birthdays, like special occasions, weddings, birthdays, you name it. We've had so many good times together. And what I found with this, the club, why is it helpful to me, is because I actually struggle to meet up with friends all the time and maintain relationships. I often find that unless I have a reason to meet somebody, I don't meet them. And this club is actually good for me because it forces me to be able to meet people regularly and spend time with them and to have conversation with people. And it's very easy to live our lives very isolated. And I can get so engrossed with the internet or with TV and other things, and completely forget about relationships with people. And relationships are so difficult. Also, they're very hard to maintain. And coming from my background, I've experienced a lot of rejection. I've experienced a lot of hurt, and I think that's because of I do suffer from ADHD, which makes it quite difficult for me sometimes to do the things that other people do. Like continue to maintain contact, basically be interested in other people. Sometimes I'm just so so caught up with my own world that I'm totally not really thinking about other people. And in order to have relationships, you've got to think about other people. You can't just think about yourself. You've got to be engaged with other people. Now how does this relate to the woman at the well? Now, the woman at the well, she came to this well at a certain time when nobody else came to this well, and she wasn't really expecting anyone to come to this well. And Jesus, we read, is that when he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee, now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. Now Jesus had to go through Samaria. So in other words, this was a natural journey for Jesus. And Jesus was tired. And so he just, wanted to rest, basically, and have a drink. So it wasn't nothing, it was just a natural thing for him to go to the well. And at this well, he saw this woman. Now the Priory Club, to me, is part of the community. And I see it as this well. It's like a well where people come to. They come to it naturally. It's not there's nothing in it that's, you have to be there, but it is in our community. So it's somewhere where people just come and they do sit down and they do rest and they talk with each other. Now, when Jesus came to this well, he saw this woman and he started talking to her. Now, this woman, as I said, was a woman that was very... So I'm just going to find my PowerPoint. This woman was a Samaritan woman. Now, the Samaritans had no dealings with Jews, and they were separated, and they didn't have relationships. Now, often we find that in our community. Actually, there is often people in our community that we actually have no relationship with. We don't talk to them at all, and we don't have anything, to do with them, and that's a big problem in our community. And I think the main reason for this is that people avoid other people, and that's and there's a lot of broken relationships in our community. And if you've been hurt by somebody, then quite often, we cut ourselves off. We don't want to be around other people. And this woman was the same. I mean, she was so cut off from other people that when Jesus offered her this water, she said, "Give me this water so that I don't have to come here anymore." And so she didn't have to come to the well anymore. Now, I often find this is that people want to have this one-to-one relationship with God, or they just want to control things so that they have this relationship, but it's not with people. Because why is that? Why is it that we do not want to have relationships with people? Well, let me say that relationships with people are hard. They are difficult. It's very difficult sometimes to have relationships, and it's easier to avoid them and to cut ourselves off. And this woman was one of those women who cut herself off from other people. She didn't want to... She felt like, for whatever reason, she felt like people would not accept her, would not love her, didn't like her. And maybe she didn't like people. Maybe she just didn't want anything to do with them. So when Jesus spoke to her, she was shocked. She was surprised. Why was this man speaking to her, a rabbi? She was shocked. I mean, a Jew of all people speaking with her. Now, when Jesus spoke to her, he told her to go and call her husband. Now this woman did not have a husband. She had she had 5 husbands, and the person she was with right now, she was not married to, which is like what the Christians say, she was living in sin. Now in those days, not being married or living with a person with you're not married was very much a shameful thing. And if you were married, you could not get a divorce if you was a woman. Now this woman had been divorced 5 times by men. That means she'd been rejected 5 times. 5 men had gotten rid of her, and now she was on the 6th one, who wasn't even going to marry her. Now she must have felt, I mean, that is a lot of baggage, and she probably felt like not very good about herself. Now when Jesus, the way Jesus spoke to her, and he said, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and him thou hast is not thy husband. In this you have said truly. Now the way Jesus spoke to her, he didn't show any condemnation. He didn't condemn her. He didn't tell her that, you are rubbish, that you are no good, or what, he just said, okay, so you've had 5 husbands. Actually, Jesus knew that. He didn't even have to ask her. He just spoke, because I don't think this woman was going to tell him that she had 5 husbands. I mean, that is something you don't go and tell somebody, I've got 5 husbands. It's not really, I had 5 husbands. It's not something you would divulge. So Jesus actually somehow found out, God spoke to him about this woman and said, you've had 5 husbands. And this must have been so incredible for this woman, because this woman had probably been hiding or been ashamed about herself for so long, and that she didn't want anybody to know about this. But when Jesus said, you've had 5 husbands, she realized that God knew, that somehow this man knew about her, and he wasn't going to wasn't going to condemn her, but said, except, you've said truly, you have no husband. And that is so powerful. And it was so powerful that this woman, was responded in a way that said, I know God, you must be a prophet. How did you know that? How did you know that about me? And instead of, just having a carrying on that conversation about husbands and stuff like that, or relationships, she does what a lot of people do, is that they go into a questioning mode, and they begin to question, and they talk about things which actually are not necessarily about them, but it's about something like the church. I mean, a lot of people, when I talk to them about being a Christian and that, they often come out with this question, well, how comes there's so many churches? Why do people go to different churches? Or why is there so many gods? How do I know what God do I believe in, and stuff like that? Now, this woman was the same. This woman spoke and said to Jesus, he said, and I think it's in verse. He said, sorry about this. This is a bit of a delay. She said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where you must worship is in Jerusalem. Now this must have been what was separating the Samaritans and the Jews at the time, was that the Samaritans worshipped on this mountain, whereas the Jews worshipped in Jerusalem. Now, often isn't that what we say? People say, why do people worship over here? And why do other people worship there? And we think that that's a really, we wonder why. Why can't we all worship together? Now, Jesus answered and said, Woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is a spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in truth. Now, I think what Jesus is saying there is that what he wanted is reality. He wanted, what Jesus wants people to worship him, but to worship the truth, to worship in reality. And so many times we don't worship in reality. Sometimes we can worship God, but hold back. And sometimes we avoid our lives. And we can be going to church, or we can be going to a mosque, you could be going places, and actually hiding your real self. You could be living a double life. You could be just practicing a religion, but actually you are not being, you're hiding your real self. And I did that for a long time in my Christian life, actually, and I still do, actually. I can be so, in church I'm so spiritual, I'm holier now, but at home, when I get home, or I could be doing all sorts of things that I shouldn't be doing. I could be shouting, and I could be angry, and sometimes I feel like a hypocrite. And that's often the problem with people people think that Christians, we're just hypocrites, and they don't want anything to do with us, and that's a real problem. And I think this woman, she was thinking that way, about people, is that they're just hypocrites. And I hate them, and I don't want anything to do with them. And there are people like that say, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go with these hypocrites, And why do we need to go to church anyway? I don't have to be a Christian to go to church. Now, Jesus is saying, that in a one sense, she's right. You're right. You don't have to go to church. You don't have to go to a mosque to be, or you don't have to go to a religious institution. And But what you do need is you need to be honest, and you need to have integrity. But also, Jesus didn't say you shouldn't have relationships either. Now, it's easy to cut yourself off. And people who say, "Oh, I don't need to go to church," often it's because they are, they don't really want to work on relationships. And I think, the main commandment Jesus gave was to love God with all your heart, soul and mind. And the second commandment is to love your neighbour as yourself. Now, how are you going to love your neighbour if you don't speak to your neighbour? If you don't meet up with your neighbour, how are you supposed to love them? And that is why it's important to meet other people. And this is what we try to do at the Priory Club. We have this place where people can come together and they can meet together and get to know each other. And it can be difficult for some people, and some people will not come to the Priory Club because it's difficult and they find it hard. But I believe this is the only way we can develop and grow and learn, is when we spend time with people, when we get to talk to people and people get to talk to us. We get to know ourselves more. And actually, how do you know that you are really loved? And unless you are honest and you learn to be real, and you get people's feedback, and you allow people into your life, and then they give you and they talk to you and you talk to them. How are you going to know you're accepted until you begin to communicate and share with other people? And I think communication is so important. I mean, with God, but with also with other people. And Jesus was saying this here, that the real worshippers are ones who worship God in spirit and in truth. They're people who do not hide, but they are real and they're honest. And he's seeking people like that. Now, this woman was just blown away by this. She just couldn't believe it, and but she just got it. I mean, she got it. She really, really got it, and she got it so much that that she just believed that this guy must be the Messiah. Now, that's interesting. When she said he must be the Messiah, what's interesting about that is that salvation is when we begin to become our real selves. I believe that. That's what salvation is about. Because in the beginning, the Bible in Genesis, after Adam and Eve sinned, what did they do? They hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. They hid. And they were afraid. And they didn't want anybody to see them. They didn't want God to see them. And they hid from each other. They clothed themselves. Now, before the fall, man was naked and not ashamed. They didn't feel, they were like, there was no shame in their game. They were just like, they could be themselves. But somehow, when they ate of the tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge and good and evil, they became aware of their own nakedness, and they began to hide themselves. Now, when God came to them in the cool of the day, they hid themselves. Now, God said to them, "Who told you you were naked?" Now somehow they had became aware of their nakedness, and their judgment had told them that they were now naked and they were ashamed. Now, I believe that salvation is when we come to know ourselves, we come to accept ourselves, and we begin to allow God into our lives, and we begin to show who we are, and we receive God, his love and his acceptance of us. Now, when we do, it is so liberating. It's so great to know that you are accepted by God. I just think it's the best news, the greatest news you could ever have is to know that you are accepted by God. Now, I don't know about other religions. I'm not an expert in religion. But one thing I do know is that with Christianity, it's all about God loving us and accepting us. And God proved his love for us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Now, he didn't wait for us to become good. He didn't wait for us to all tidy ourselves up. He came and he died on the cross, and he shed his blood for us. Now, even before I was born, he died. Now, that was God saying to us, he loves me. And even though I fall beneath his will, even though I do things that I shouldn't do, God loves me. And knowing that he loves me, I'm free. I don't have to hide anymore. I don't have to cover it up. I don't have to cover up my sin. I can just be who I am. I can be honest about myself. Now, does that mean that now I do whatever I want to do? Well, I don't really want to sin, really. I mean, to me, why do we sin anyway? Why do I sin? And oftentimes I find that I sin because I feel I'm looking for love. And I think that's what sin is, basically, is looking for love in all the wrong places. Now, God is love. That's who God is. And God is saying, look, I don't want you to go anywhere else but to me, because I am love. And sometimes, when we don't know God, when we don't know God's love, we look for love, and we search for love. And that is what I call, the Bible calls sin, is actually looking for, is taking something, someone, and putting them in the place of God. Now that is idolatry. Now God doesn't condemn us. God loves us. He loves us. And he wants us to know his love. So what does he do? He loves us. Well, that's what he does. God is always there. He just loves us, and he wants us to come to him. And that is salvation, when we really come to know the God who is love. And we are then freed from ourselves. We're freed from a life of looking and searching for love. And we're just happy because we know that we are loved. And we know that what are we doing? No matter what I do, I know that I am loved. And once we know that, this woman knew that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, she knew that that was her salvation. She knew that that is what she was looking for all along. She had felt so rejected. She had had 5 husbands, and the husband she was with, the man she was with, wasn't her husband. She had felt so rejected and hurt, and probably had given up feeling of feeling acceptance of herself. And here was Jesus. She felt this acceptance of him, by him, and for her, that was salvation. And she didn't want to just keep this to herself. She felt, I've got to tell other people about this. I've got to go into town and I've got to share and tell people. And the word she used is that, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Now, did Jesus tell her everything she ever did? Well, I say Jesus didn't tell her everything she ever did, but what he did do to her, he told her everything she ever did that was important. This was the most important thing for her, was this whole feeling of acceptance. And she had never felt that. And that was the most important thing in her whole life. So when Jesus did accept her as she is, that was like everything for her. And for me, being a Christian, when I found out that God loves me and accepts me as I am, that was everything for me. I mean, that means that I don't have to hide anything I ever did. I don't have to deny anything. And I can be me. And when she went out and she told all these people, they came back. They came and to see whether this could be their Messiah, whether he was the Messiah. And so they came to the town and made their way towards him. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. Then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? I move on. And it says, many of the Samaritans from the town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with him, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves and know that this man is the Saviour of the world.